Wonderful. Let's do this. 20 Kazi. It's, of course, 6 minutes after the talk there. Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, for making time. Asante sana. Show goes on, and of course, a warm welcome.
Thank you.
Is that comfortable?
Yes.
Wonderful. There you go. Oh, how are you doing? Hoping that you are doing very well. This is the summit, and we are now live. We are in session. Of course, if you are watching us from a part of the world, this is a program that comes your way each and every Wednesday, 9 p.m. And we are slightly behind schedule, 6 minutes into the hour. We apologize for that delay, but of course, show has to go on. We now have everybody on board because it's a conversation that we do not want you to miss. Remember, it is a very interesting time to be alive. Of course, let me give you perspective of that. In the neighboring Tanzania, there is actually the Africa Food Systems Forum Summit that is underway right there. And of course, right here in Kigali, there is the Africa Smart Cities Investment Summit that is also underway. And in our neighboring country, Nairobi, rather Kenya, we have the most anticipated and also the mother of all climate-related forums, the Africa Climate Summit, that has just closed today. And of course, all these summits, all these conversations are actually revolving around the issue of sustainability. And so tonight, the summit on Rwanda television is actually meeting the Africa Climate Summit for us to give you a dose of analysis on this important forum that just closed in Nairobi. Of course, we understand that there's been a lot of declarations that have come out of that particular summit, but we want to ask ourselves what will be needed to move the conversation from just aspirations to actions. That is what we'll be talking about right here tonight on the program. Because, of course, the conversation around green energy, of course, sustainability and all that, renewable energy, e-mobility and all that, and those who are within the circular economy. We'll be talking a bit about that right here on the program. If you're hearing this voice for the first time, if you're seeing me for the first time, as always, my name is Eugene. And I want to welcome you to the program, and I want to let you know that it is an interactive show. All you need to do is just jump on the X platform. You'll be able to see where we've already put the conversation is already actually live as we speak on our YouTube channel. All you need to do is just jump onto the chat section, and I'll be reading your feedback on this specific chat box. And of course, you need to do that right about now. If you want to send a tweet or an X, go to the X platform and leave your comment right there at the hashtag #TheSummitRW, and I'll be checking or sampling your feedback. Let me introduce our panelists who are joining us right here in studio, but of course also those who are joining us from far and wide from across the different parts of the world. I'll start right here in studio. From my far left is none other than Ghislaine Irakoze, who's the founder and CEO of West Zone. Thank you for making time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you again. Eh?
Yeah, it's such a great pleasure.
Wonderful. And of course, also joining us in studio right here is Mary Wakamurera, who's actually the operations manager at Go Kabisa. You're into e-mobility. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for having us, Eugene.
Right. And of course, joining us from far and wide, we have none other than Shavi Sharma, who's the head of international programs at Ashton. Thank you so much for making time for joining us, Sharma Asensana. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us is none other than Naipamei Kaikai, who's the founder and CEO of the Youth Champions for SDGs. Thank you so much for making time, Kaikai. Right. Also with us is none other than Martin Fremula, who's the founder and CEO of Octavia Carbon. Thank you so much, Martin, for joining us. I want us just to dive into the conversation tonight. Very interesting time to be alive, like I said. Of course, the conversation today is all around sustainability, is all about renewable energy. And of course, I want us to start from here in studio and just to find perspectives on this Africa Climate Summit that has just ended in Nairobi. And it's very important to just get perspective, first of all, from a global perspective in terms of the conversations that we've had from that specific summit. Mary, I'll start with you, especially on the aspect of how sustainability is now becoming a buzzword and how you feel as a person who's within the renewable energy space and, of course, e-mobility space. What does this make you feel as a player in this sector?
Thank you, Eugene. This is a good conversation to have,
Yeah.
and we are happy that Smart City Conference is happening right now in Kigali. It's something to learn from. Towards the climate sustainability, we are the one to play the role. As if I can say what we are doing right now, we are into the EVs. Yeah. We are contributing on the reducing of the carbon emission, and we are giving out the EVs. We are providing the EVs and all the infrastructure around the EVs to reduce the carbon emission.
Wonderful. Ghislaine,
yes.
You've been within the circular economy space, pushing for recycling and of course saving the environment. This conversation around sustainability, the conversation around renewables, how does this make you feel, first of all, as a player in the industry?
First of all, I mean, I'll just start saying that we are living interesting time because, I mean, such diverse conversations going on in Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, and I believe we need to rethink the way we approach sustainability actions. And I think what I'm lacking right now is that the conversation going on, the policies being enacted are trying to understand sustainability from a win-win perspective. Yeah. So how do we disrupt systemic changes? And I believe we need to look beyond sustainability as from like a net positive climate perspective, but also integrate social and economical narratives. And I'm liking the way that all the conversations are trying to review sustainability from marked angles, which I believe is really great and a new addition to this conversation going on.
Interesting. And of course, let's add some more additions to this conversation by bringing in Shavi. Shavi, you are the head of international programs at Ashden. And of course, there's been a lot of work happening from where you sit, especially in the financing space, and of course, dealing with those within, the sustainability space. I want to read your mind, especially on this first Africa Climate Summit, which is just closed in Nairobi. A talking shop, or are we seeing a change, a paradigm shift in terms of how Africa as a continent is going to be viewed as far as the issues about sustainability are concerned?
I think it's been an exciting few days at the summit, and it has been really evident from the conversations that there is a willingness to collaborate, there is a willingness to work together, especially across sectors. So there has been talk about the integration of different sectors coming together, energy access with mobility, with nature-based solutions. And there has clearly been an acknowledgement that even though more climate finance is being promised, there is still a shortage of finance flowing into Africa. And it is really critical for more finance to flow to frontline organizations, those that are working directly with the communities to deliver effective solutions.
But still, while I have you, I want to read your thoughts also on some of the declarations that have been made from this summit. We have heard that there's a call for major polluters to contribute more to poorer countries. How much of a bigger statement is this from an action perspective? How much do you feel this going beyond just, rhetoric to action? Do you feel that there's muscle enough to push for this, despite the fact that, close to the 100 billion a year commitment by the rich countries not being fulfilled so far?
I think time will tell, but nothing can be solved with one single summit and the commitments made here. So we need to see long-term support by the global north to African countries, and we need to see a real step change from donors and investors. And like I said earlier, we need to see the funding really flowing through to small and medium-sized organizations.
Wonderful. Martin, I want to take or read your thoughts as well. Nothing can be fixed by one summit, but I want to hear from where you sit. You've been at the heart of that particular summit right there. What you heard from there in terms of even President William Ruto calling for a carbon tax discussion. We understand that this is coming up at a point where President Joe Biden himself has not yet embraced any particular carbon pricing mechanisms. This is according to John Kerry. How do you see the statements from this particular summit, especially from a fact or a point of declaration, moving from that aspiration to action? What will be needed?
It's a great question. And clearly, the question of how to tax pollution and who pays for it is very much on the table. And I think an important discussion for the Kenyan government, speaking on behalf of Global South nations, so their right to raise that point. Where that discussion will ultimately go, what the price of carbon will be agreed on, and so on, is a question that is to be decided. But it is an important step forward to put that into distinct political declarations like the one that we've just seen coming out of Nairobi, and a clear call on global North countries to do their part in financing the climate transition.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'll be coming back to you. Let me just roll back the conversation back to here in studio. Mary, I want to talk to you a bit about the space that you're in, just specifically on the things that give you sleepless nights as those who are trying to offer a solution in cutting down on carbon emission by, pushing for electric vehicles. We've seen an endorsement of these vehicles. Even in the Nairobi, there was the e-mobility parade just to showcase the muscle and the ability for these vehicles. But what gives you sleepless nights as an investor, as a person who's a key player in this space? What do you want changed? What do you need worked on, like yesterday?
I would say what gives me like a sleepless night is people don't still understand what is EV, or people don't understand how they can change from gas to the EVs. People are around the question of the infrastructure. If I buy the EV, do I have the garage? Do I have the spare parts? Do I have the charging points? If I move from one province to the other, do I have the charging stations? But we wanna assure people that as people in the EV industry, we made sure that this is already available. We have garage available in Rwanda as we speak, where people can actually go in case of anything. We have different charging points in the country. We have spare parts. So all these are solved. People shouldn't worry about what's going to happen if I shift to the EV. So, but I believe with time, this is going to change.
Right, so time will tell. But do we have the time, Ghislaine? How fast can we leapfrog to have a proper understanding of the solutions that, these new models of energy, movement, mobility, even the space that you're in, the circular economy, from where people can be able to start understanding that they can start earning, by not dumping that old computer, but being able to bring it over to people like you, and they'll be able to earn per kilogram and probably some of the other models that you have. What needs to be done to fast track this?
Yeah, I think I echo with your idea. So basically, there is an issue of market acceptability. So how do we roll out sustainable innovations, especially in low and middle income communities who are not exposed to the sustainability industry? And I believe what we have done so far at Wayzone is customizing the business model, ensuring that not only we touch base on the importance of sustainability, but also integrating the social and economical aspects. For instance, with our mobile app or other platforms that we run, consumers are able to save cost by acquiring refurbished electronics, even though we demonstrate the actual carbon emissions they are diverting, but there is an economic incentive they're getting, which push them into sustainability industry. And I believe matter of time, we need to do as much as possible, ensuring that we design business models that are kind of like integrated, both, economically as well as socially. And of course, we need a stakeholders mapping or stakeholders integration, because so far in this industry, there is a possibility of creating those partnership linkages. For instance, EVs can be repurposed, and I believe that's where like such mutual collaboration, mutual partnership can speed up the adoption of those sustainability solutions.
Interesting. And it's going to take some time to be able to see that take place. Let me bring in Kai. I'm told she's back up. Kai, you know, as a young person who actually founded what we call the Youth Champions for SDGs, you know, the voice of young people. I saw from that declaration the need to involve the youth actively in all these sustainability conversations. Do you feel that this is just, you know, a clarion call that never, you know, meets its core objective? Or in which ways do you feel young people can be fully involved in the sustainability conversation?
Thank you very much. So for me, I feel like we are taking wrong direction, because for the first time, the youth were involved in the high-end delegation conversation, and they were able to give out their views. But this is not enough, because it's only one goal out of 17. So we're looking forward that as we move forward, all the 17 SDGs, the champions for each goal, will be involved in the decision making and coming up with strategy for adaptation of each goal, and involving them even in the finance sector, not only in public forums, but in reality, you know, in the real work. Yeah, so, but as we stand here, it's a good direction, because the other COP 18, COP 19, up to COP 25, the young people were not involved in the decision-making process. But here we are before COP 28, the youth are sitting together with head of state. They're also giving out their priorities, and even the children were there, the indigenous communities were there, the civil society. So according to my view, I feel that this was the most inclusive summit we have seen in a very, very long time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kai. Stay with us. We'll come back to you one more time. I want to hear from Sharma. Sharma, you know, there's a very interesting statistic that I've been seeing even while I was preparing for this conversation tonight. The aspect of Africa getting about only 12% of nearly 300 billion in terms of financing need annually. And looking at the continent being the least contributor, you know, to climate change effects. I know President Paul Kagame did challenge the leaders that it is time to move away from the blame game and be part of the solution strongly. But what will be needed for Africa's SMEs who actually are in need of financing to be able to catapult or to actually leapfrog their ideas, their innovations in actually moving towards, you know, greener energy, greener sustainability solutions? What would be needed for SMEs to unlock, you know, the financial need and tap into the international climate financing options?
I think for Africa, the conversation is not so much about decarbonization. It's more about boosting energy access. And through energy access, it's about providing access to safe drinking water, improving food production, access to healthcare, creating jobs, creating livelihoods, and really building resilience in the communities. The resilience that is really important to get the communities to adapt and manage the impacts of climate change. And I think sort of we see that more with the Power Up campaign. We see many African organizations calling to put energy access at the heart of Kenya's climate adaptation plans. And similarly, you know, a lot of the conversations that I saw happening at the summit, it was about energy access and about nature and how the two sort of come together more than about carbon.
Interesting. Martin, I want to read your take on the same question, especially on the space that those small and medium enterprises that are within the you know, sustainability space are concerned. What do you think has been the missing link in terms of accessing to you know, financial support that they've been needing?
I Thank you. And being the CEO of a medium enterprise myself and scaling direct air carbon capture technology here in Kenya, which is amongst the world's best places to do so, we have some perspective on that. And I would say that increasingly the early stage capital that innovators like us and our large Kenyan team need are available. And I think the very first steps are possible to take. I think what is increasingly going to be needed is for that innovation to be truly disruptive. We need also much more institutional capital, that capital, to really get us to scale, to really overcome the hurdles that we face in our particular region with access to finance, especially the high cost of that finance, and essentially using revenue from carbon markets and from Western corporates who would then deliver on the sustainability targets and objectives, and leveraging that at much larger scale than actually building climate unicorns is not a name of the game. And for that, I think we need much more serious and much more deep pools of much deeper pools of capital as well.
Interesting. Ghislaine, you've been in the sector or in the space for quite some time. Share with us, what you've always seen as the missing link, but also what you feel has been done that can be replicated across the different, spaces, from even beyond our borders here in Rwanda. What was the missing link in terms of financing for SMEs who need that financing so badly to be able to support within the sustainability space?
Yeah, sure. I think our first applaud all efforts being put into providing climate finance. I think so far the best outcome from this summit was AFDB's Youth Adaptation Fund, which has been funded. It's a $1 billion US facility, which I believe it's a great step in financing youth-led SMEs. And as we need to adapt to this norm because in the next few years, we have the largest workforce on the globally. And then we need to tap into such network of young people because it's a great asset that we need to start to capitalize on. And I think this is such a great step in providing, even though I would say it's just a drop in the ocean, but it's a great step. And I believe we need to rethink the way we allow institutional investors to come on the continent. And I guess this has to do on the way we easy access to the markets as well as the ease of doing business. And I believe as we reinforce all those policies, we're able to attract different institutional investors who can actually fill the gap of climate finance, which is really huge throughout the continent. Yeah. And so far, we know that Rwanda is actually leading on some climate initiatives. And I believe that's where we need to reinforce South-South cooperation, allowing countries in the global South to learn from one another. I think so far, Rwanda has already raised some initiatives by establishing Rwanda Cooperation Agents to allow or facilitate other countries to learn from other local best practices. I believe we need to create such holistic learning environment for countries to learn from the best practices that they have in their home countries. Yeah. And I believe this can catalyze climate action.
Right, interesting. Mary, I know there are incentives in place, especially to encourage more uptake in electric mobility or EVs. Just share with us, what is already in that space that you feel, like you mentioned earlier, the lack of awareness. So tonight, if there's anyone watching, what are those incentives that you feel could be able to make more people adapt to this, new models that are in the end sustainable?
Some of the incentives, I would say, like the government incentives on the no import duties. When a car gets here, there's no taxes. So already this is helping the sector to have the EVs on the cheaper prices. We have the reduced tariff that is introduced by the government, the reduced tariff on people who are using the EVs. This is already contributing to the whole ecosystem as well. We have no VAT. So already these are the strong incentives that should really empower us to shifting to the EVs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Kai, if you're still with us, I want to pick from you in terms of the aspect of the conversation around the superpowers versus the considered Davids in this conversation of dealing with climate change mitigation. It is very interesting that there's been a call from this particular summit that it is time to move away from the us versus them conversation and uniting in one call, because climate change is affecting everybody in this particular situation. But how then do you feel the issue of equality will actually come to pass? Because President William Ruto did mention that it is time to have a global conversation about a carbon tax on polluters. I want to read your thoughts on what will be the equalizer, especially for those who are polluters and those who are affected, yet they are not the contributors.
Yeah, thanks again. So according to my view, those who are polluting the environment should give enough compensation to those who are getting the carbon credit to stabilize as they're costly. So the equalization to African countries is that we have high carbon credit content, and so the westernized countries to pay a better price to clear the amount of pollution. So for example, there should be one rate of carbon credit between $100 to $200 instead of the peanuts are buying right now. Like here in Kenya, there's some companies doing it, but they're not giving people enough money. So asking those who are polluting the environment to pay a high price to mitigate the issues, we help them start using green energy and also avoid using fossil fuels, to start using high fuels and electric power. So that's what we do, and I feel like that is the most equal. If they are going to buy carbon credit at a very high price, are going to reduce they are producing from their companies.
Interesting. Martin, I would love to read your thoughts on this. Kaikai, I know we'll definitely get back to you, but I want to hear Martin's take on the aspect of this conversation that President Ruto is saying it's time to have that conversation. How should it look like? Or in your opinion, is this the silver bullet to the equalization of those who are committing the pollution and those who are least contributors yet most affected?
Yes, pollution must not be free. I do not chuck my waste and my garbage into my neighbor's yard, and neither should rich countries do the same with African countries. And while I do think there is a question of like how can you regulate the price of carbon and how can you then sort of like establish that globally, what we are certainly working on in Kenya with direct air carbon capture is a method to technologically remove carbon from the atmosphere, measure the actual molecules of CO2 to the milligram, and then store it permanently in the countries of the East African Rift Valley, Kenya to start with, Rwanda possibly in future, Ethiopia and others too. And that will ultimately give us a tool to hold polluters accountable, saying that there is a technology that can reverse the flow of carbon out of geological layers into the atmosphere and taking it from the atmosphere back underground where it came from, which is ultimately the only way that we will address climate change permanently. And so that technology, as it comes down in cost, should also give us a leverage point, especially from the perspective of East Africans, to really push the polluters to say there is now a technological price for polluting the atmosphere. That is to scrub that CO2 out of the atmosphere and put it back where it came from. And that will ultimately, we hope, ease the political conversation as well, which is, of course, a difficult one globally as well.
Right. Quite a difficult conversation indeed. Sharma, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Is this going to be the silver bullet, or what do you feel would be the best model of, creating an equalizer such that there is a little bit of fairness, especially for countries that are developing that feel they're unfairly targeted, especially when it comes to the effects that they have to go through?
I think in Africa, you have a lot of communities living without access to energy, and by working to provide them with access to energy, as there a lot of social enterprises are doing at the moment, a lot of nonprofits are really working to provide off-grid communities with access to modern forms of energy. And I think the best equalizer is getting them access to modern forms of energy, and then sort of building resilience to help them adapt to climate change.
Interesting. So I want to open up the floor. And of course, like we always say, that the show is very interactive. All you need to do is get in touch with us through our different social media platform, the X platform. All you need to do is add the hashtag #TheSummitRW. I'll be quickly reading your feedback. If you've been listening to the conversation from the beginning and you have a comment about the statements that have been made by our panelists, or you have a thought around this particular conversation in general, feel free to share your thoughts with us. Also, on our YouTube live stream on the chat section, of course, you can also jump in there and leave a comment. Like I can see Benson Chungie Ngunga, who's actually saying that, loving the summit, a youth from Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for watching all the way in Zimbabwe. We'd love to read your thoughts on how Zimbabwe is dealing with this whole conversation around sustainability, and also what you think about Africa's voice as far as this Africa Climate Summit is concerned. Of course, we'll be reading those feedback or those comments in the course of the program. Ghislaine, I want to come back to you, especially on the aspect of what will be needed as an equalizer. Of course, I've asked this question earlier, but I want to hear what you think in this particular case. What will be the equalizer here? Because there's need to shift, at least for now, from the conversation around us versus them, because we've had that a lot of times. As a young person, what would be the creative ways that you'd be saying that need to be adapted, to deal with this whole conversation around those who are polluters most versus those who are affected most, yet they're the least polluters?
I think we need to align priorities because, to be honest, priorities vary from geographical context. So global north, basically developed countries have their own priorities, as well as even here in the global south, we have our own priorities. So we need to be just. So basically in those conversations, ensure that we are aligning priorities, because so far, while like developed countries have progressed enough to see beyond different systems, here in Africa, we're still connecting dots, ensuring that even though we are creating some climate policies, we need to ensure that they are aligned with other specific economical aspects. And it might be strange for developed countries, but I think the equalizer should just be, we need to be just and ensure that the systems we're putting in place and allow developing countries to really create their own priorities. Otherwise, we might find ourselves in a situation where priorities are not aligned, and then at the end of the day, we are putting resources where there are no tangible results anticipated. Right.
And Mary, when you talk about putting resources, there are a lot of resources that go behind the EV space. And I want to read your thoughts in terms of adaptability, because you said earlier on that there's a challenge of, first of all, understanding the whole process. So in this particular case, even the consumers are being pushed to make a choice. And earlier on, even in the conversations at the Smart Cities, Summit, there was a question around that aspect of affordability. If we want people to transition or to get access to renewable energy solutions, including the electric mobility, then the issue of cost has to come to play. Where someone who is being told you need to transition to this clean mobility, but they have to pay, in their mind, 2 or 3 times what they would have paid for the ordinary fossil fuel vehicle. How would you explain this to someone like a 2-year-old, so that they can be able to understand the aspects of the cost and why they should look at the long term in terms of what you go through, maintenance and managing the EV versus the other fossil fuel driven vehicles?
Regarding the costs, first of all, like Ghislaine just talked about it, we need to align our priorities, right? We need to understand what is better for us, and this is not just for the government or for you or for him. This is for everyone. Yeah. Climate sustainability is for everyone. So regarding the costs, as the EV company, we are putting out there on the market as easy as possible, easy ways for people to access the EVs. We have different options. I would encourage people to come and talk to us. We have different terms, and according to what one wants, and you can always work around what is possible or what one can afford. Yeah. But there's affordability for everyone, because the cost is too high comparing to if we keep using the gas cars, if I can say, yeah. What is going to be in the next few years is going to cost us more. And people also think that EVs are expensive. They're not expensive. Again, it's just getting to us, talking to us, having a conversation for them to understand. But they are not expensive as they think. Yeah. And remember, these are new on the market. Yeah, these are brand new cars on the market, right? So they're not as expensive as people think.
So you feel it's a perception issue. Yes. I want to hear what Kai says, especially on the aspect of the cost-related issues that would be able to allow for ease of using these new technologies, especially if we are to transition and be able to have access to this, models that are considered sustainable. As a young person, Kai, what do you think should be the incentives that would be able to encourage more people to uptake these new sustainability solutions that we are seeing today?
So I'm going to explain that using an example that Kenya is implementing at the moment. Mm-hmm. So electric motorcycles and motorbikes, the government have removed all the taxes for importing it, mm-hmm. and also for those who are buying as fast users. So the government is paying an incentive of around 60,000 for all the young people who are buying the new motorbikes for business. Mm-hmm. So if all governments in the 54 countries in Africa employ such kind of incentives, yeah. then the young people who are in that business will be eased to buy the new motorbikes, which are electric, and leave the old system. Mm. Same applies to the cars and even trains. And also the young people also have a priority of, are they buying it for business or they just buying it for personal use? Because it is important to invest more money in business, because it will give you back than just for personal use. If you lose a job like in 2020 during COVID, you start blaming that this new system brought this and this.
Wonderful.
So the three types of incentives: remove taxation, mm-hmm. Reduce the cost of buying, and also reduce the licensing processes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sharma, you have been involved in, competitions or even incentives to actually allow for more engagement and more participation in, offering sustainable solutions from where you sit at Ashton. Talk to us a bit about the place of this in incentivizing more participation and bringing to the market more options as far as solutions, sustainability solutions are concerned.
So through the Ashton Awards, actually, we come across a lot of innovation. And recently we've seen innovation, particularly in clean cooking and EVs, as we were talking about. Mm-hmm. But it's across the board. We've announced our finalists for the 2023 Ashton Awards during Climate Summit. And we know that most of these organizations need capital to scale up. And in terms of the kinds of capital that they need, most important is the capex, so the working capital. And debt obviously plays a huge role in allowing them to grow their businesses, to sort of respond to market needs, to be able to carry enough inventory and to meet customer requirements.
And how would you be able to gauge, the impact of this? What would you be able to say? You've been able to look back and done or did an evaluation. What are you seeing? What are the trends that you're seeing that you'll be able to say, I think you need to do more of this, or probably you need to adjust the approach?
I think, first of all, I would say you need more debt, period. All companies are looking for finance to sort of grow their businesses, to grow their sort of customer base. And we need different amounts of debt, different sort of ticket sizes for different kinds of organizations. And you need really small amounts to trickle down to community-based organizations, to organizations that are working at the last mile with those communities. And that's where we feel, as Ashton, over the last few years, we feel that there's a gap in Africa, in particular, in helping these businesses, helping these organizations gain small amounts of funding, small amounts of debt that they need to really strengthen their businesses.
Interesting. Martin, talk to us a bit about that, because I've had this several times. Every time I've had conversations with different people, the aspect of smaller communities being left out and the need to actually involve the locals in every solution that is being put out. It's been mentioned as one of the biggest missing links, and it beats logic for any innovator or anybody who's trying to fix a solution to fail to actually look at the end recipient or have them in mind even during the ideation process. How do you explain this phenomenon, and what do you think would be the ultimate solution to fixing this, to ensure that the end consumer, the local person, is at the heart of these sustainable solutions from the ideation stage?
It's a great question, thank you. And the problem in many ways is that climate benefit is something that is hard to quantify and measure precisely, which also means that smaller scale projects tend to find it a lot harder to access climate specific finance and the types of finance that can actually drive the clean growth at scale. So I think new analytics and data platforms are very much needed to actually drive the scale up and really allow the trickling down of that finance to the local innovators that are driving this change. I think the Kenyan government is looking to take an active role there too, like really mandating a level of community involvement in various forms of carbon work and things that relate to carbon revenue. It is a difficult question that will need solving over time. We're optimistic that the approaches taken by our government in Kenya and in places in the region beyond that will drive forwards solutions to drive finance to local innovators, while crucially also enabling the large scale projects that can actually drive GDP growth that is green and clean, and that's very much needed across the region as well, which is really what we as Octavia Carbon are looking to drive forwards: large scale green industrialization based on renewable carbon captured from the atmosphere. But that is of course very much hand in hand with the broader climate agenda and of course the work that is done by communities on the ground.
Wonderful, interesting. On our chat section, on our live stream on YouTube, I see Learn to Grow 2023 says, watching from Washington, United States of America. Thank you so much for tuning in all the way in the US. Would love to read your thoughts on this conversation that we're having right now. What do you think would be able to bring in the aspect of, just transitions, but of course also the aspect of the carbon tax discussion? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Any moment from now, I'll be able to read the feedback once it trickles in. Ghislaine, on the aspect of people-centered solutions, I want to hear the significance of this, even from where you sit at West Zone. Why is it not majorly the approach by those who are coming up with what they consider solutions to, sustainable solutions?
I believe the issue is ecosystem-centered. We all know that those hardware or software solutions need a strategic distribution, and then distribution also needs infrastructure. And think from like an innovator's perspective, you can't deploy a solution without those infrastructure, and yet you can't establish those infrastructure. So I believe there is a need for government-led support to attract ecosystem supporters so that those infrastructure can be established to allow innovators to create or bring equitable distribution strategy. Because solutions can be tailored to communities. And for instance, what we are doing at Wayzone is that our refurbished devices are low cost, tailored for low income communities. But on one end, so we provide those low cost refurbished devices, but yet those low income communities need internet to fully operate their smartphones, and yet the internet is unstable in those communities. So you see, it's an ecosystem. We need to see this issue ecosystem-wise if we are to tackle like equitable distribution. But I believe by uniting specific efforts in this ecosystem, we can provide equitable distribution for those innovations.
Yeah, Mary, I want to hear your thoughts on that, but also as you give us, some of your key comments on why it is very significant to ensure that people are at the center or are at the center of every innovation. And of course, as he says, infrastructure is very important. What is your clarion call? What is it that you wish to see in terms of the need to make sure that the infrastructure is available, for the solutions you're providing to thrive?
We wish to see more players in the industry. As at Kabisa, we can't be the only ones providing the infrastructure.
You're saying
solution.
competition, bring it on.
Yeah, they say when there's a competition, that means there's market, right, as they say. Yeah. So more players in the market, infrastructure. Also this way we make people feel comfortable, right? People feel comfortable that now they're taken care of, now there's sustainability. So they will choose to move from what the cars that are being used right now to the EVs, right?
Okay. Martin, I want to come to you for the closing thoughts within the last 2-3 minutes that we have right here. How do we envision, or what do you think should be done to ensure that the conversations that were at this Africa Climate Summit move beyond rhetoric or move beyond just talk to actions? What will be needed? Because a lot of powerful statements came out of this particular space. And of course, there's the clear calls to reform global financial structures. But how, in terms of the action part of these particular statements, what will be needed to ensure that these statements that came out of this summit are moved from just aspirations or statements to action?
Eugene, and I think one key element of it will be, as you say, to sort of shift the rhetoric from being a blame game and finger pointing to really looking at shared opportunities. And so while there is an important question around loss and damages to be had, I think alongside that, I think it is also worth to look at certain situations where the Global South is actually well positioned to addressing some of these issues, and not doing it from the goodness of our heart, but really to drive clean economic growth in our region. And that can very much happen through, for example, the sale of carbon credits at large scale, especially from technologies like direct air capture that also are capable of reaching infinite scale in many ways. So I think really adopting a collaborative framing to the conversation, as Honorable President Ruto has very much done, is, I think, a key step forward to actually bringing the countries of the world together in solving this very important crisis.
Right, interesting. Kai, your take on this. How do we move, or how can conversations or the declaration move from just a declaration to actions?
My take is, I believe that everyone who made a promise should be held accountable, and within the time frame that they promised, they must deliver. And if they're not going to deliver, and then we forget about that promise, because it's high time African countries forget living on promises, but rather they should hold everyone accountable. And as citizens of Kenya and any other country, whatever your president promised you, the ministries, hold them accountable as young people, let them deliver. And as an indigenous person, I'm going to hold our president accountable for all the promises he made to the youth and to the indigenous people of Kenya.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sharma, I want to hear your take as well on this specific question. Moving these declarations, you were there, you had them, but how can they be moved from just paper to action?
All sort of work collaboratively across sectors, and we need to focus on the big picture here. So it's about looking at the core benefits of investing in climate. It's about what climate finance can bring us and how we can, put energy access at the heart of climate adaptation, how we can help the communities that lack access to energy in Africa gain access to energy and really sort of adapt to climate change. I think by sort of continuing this conversation, taking it all the way to COP this year, and really kind of focusing on how different sectors can work together, how we can stimulate the economy in Africa, how we can promote growth, promote development on the African continent is going to be key.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll come back here in studio just for one line. How does the future look like, Ghislaine, in terms of sustainability? Just one line.
It's promising in the win-win. So basically, we need to rethink the way we equitably distribute those solutions for the people and planet.
Right. One line. Just one line.
The future is promising.
The future is promising.
It's promising.
That's one. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I want to say thank you so much to our panelists who've joined us virtually and, of course, right here in studio. It's a conversation that has to continue, and we are just conversation starters. We'll see you again, same time, same place, 9 p.m., right here on this summit. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Good night and good luck.